非常感谢 Josh 的分享。的的确确呢，在整个的碳定价的政策的一个建制过程当中呢，台湾还有非常多的这个挑战呢需要克服。要如何建制一套能够长期发展的一个碳定价的制度，并且对企业有充分和国际接轨的一个减量诱因，我相信呢是台湾的政府和企业必须共同思考的一个重要议题。那我相信呢，大家听完以上的3个专题演讲，一定跟我们一样，也有许多的问题想要请教我们的专家。所以接下来呢，就让我们一起进入到我们的 Q&A 时间，一探究竟。也并且欢迎大家呢，还是可以留言在我们的平台上面，跟我们继续保持相关的互动。
And the first one is, it's really good to know you are a long-time good friend to Taiwan, and obviously you know the status of Taiwan in the international society, which is very awkward. And so, as a research fellow working for a think tank in Taiwan, the think tank is a platform, a discussion dialogue platform for industrial and governmental and academia sides. And we are wondering, okay, what would be the best or good plan strategies for the companies here in Taiwan? Because Taiwan is an export-oriented economy, and the companies here are eager to know when they are demonstrating their carbon emission efforts and what they can do and what will be the best strategy. And usually we will think of CDM and or purchase of carbon credit. And so in these two approaches, under the circumstance of climate change issues, there are a lot of issues going on. What would you suggest Taiwanese company to do in the next few years? That would be my first question. And since you mentioned option A and option B in Article 6.2, and there is a key element in the two options, which is a party friendly to Taiwan, and how we can find a party friendly to Taiwan in the first place, and what will be the strategy following that, a partnership with a good friend in terms of CDM and the carbon credit. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So with regard to what companies should do, of course, we now know that there are attempts by various countries and regions, and the European Union is leading this, to institute so-called carbon border adjustment mechanism. And this is, of course, aimed that countries that export to the European Union should face the same carbon price as those companies within the European Union. And for example, it will cover steel. And of course, Taiwan exports a lot of steel to the European Union. So now there's a discussion about how would countries be able to reduce the payment under this CBAM mechanism. And there has been, of course, the debate that if the country that exports has its own carbon price, then, of course, the carbon tax for importing into the European Union will be less. But, of course, one could even go beyond and say if the exporter shows that this export is carbon neutral, then also it should qualify for exemption from the CBAM. So the debate that Taiwan should now start with the European Union would be, what are the possibilities to get exemption from the CBAM and to push for acceptance of Article 6 credits, ITMOs, from the CBAM. Because now Germany will get new government, and this new government just 3 days ago stated in its treaty of the 3 parties forming the government that they want to work towards a global carbon market with uniform global carbon price. So European Union Commission has been hostile to global carbon market, but now the biggest government of European Union is in favor of global carbon market. So that, of course, gives the opportunity for diplomatic engagement between Taiwan and Germany on this issue, which might then influence the European Union to be more open towards carbon credits being accepted for the CBAM. But of course, this all will take many years because there is a lot of diplomatic conflict between European Union and other big countries regarding the CBAM mechanism. And what I would think that Taiwanese companies should do in the meantime, they should look for getting Article 6 carbon credits that have been fully authorized with the corresponding adjustment, with this double bookkeeping. Because now on voluntary carbon markets, there are two approaches. The one approach is to have a voluntary credit with the corresponding adjustment, meaning with a double bookkeeping, which of course will be a credit that has higher value and will be seen as having higher level of integrity. And then this is, for example, followed by the gold standard. And then there are those credits that are coming from, for example, Verra, where it's said, no, we don't want to do the double bookkeeping. And of course, these are less credible credits because they may be used twice. They may be used by the host country and then by the buyer. So my advice to industrial companies in Taiwan would be get only credits that have the full corresponding adjustment or at least a declaration that of all a corresponding adjustment will be undertaken, because these will eventually be the credits that can be used internationally, whereas the other credits, they are, I would say, of no value. And with regard to party friendly to Taiwan, well, I was participating in the side event at the COP, which was held by ITRI and the government of Belize. So Belize is a country, of course, that has significant mitigation potential, for example, in its forestry sector. So I would think that Belize should be able to do an Article 6.2 collaboration with Taiwan. Similarly, some small island states in Pacific region could do collaboration on renewable energy under Article 6.2 in principle. So I think, and nothing prevents a country to do a unilateral Article 6.2. So it could be Belize saying we do an Article 6.2 just on our own. We generate the ITMO, we authorize them, and we cancel them and give them to Taiwan. Not give them free of charge or sell them to Taiwan, but so it is clear that those governments that are friendly to Taiwan can act directly without the need to engage with any other party. So from my side, that would mean that Taiwan should get in touch with all the states with which it has diplomatic relations, helps these states on setting up the institutions that are necessary for Article 6 collaboration. And of course, companies may also help if they are active in these countries. So a joint effort to actually enable this Article 6 collaboration. And at the same time, of course, it would be important that the government of Taiwan provides certain incentives for the private companies. And of course, there can be the carrot, there can be the stick. The stick would be generic carbon pricing, and I think eventually Taiwan will need domestic carbon pricing, or to have the carrot, which would be a subsidy for actually taking up carbon credits from overseas.
Great, thank you. Would like to see your opinions about COP26. You feel good about it or bad about it? And because we heard a lot of comments which are not so satisfactory about this outcome of COP26, and how do you think of it? And the other one following this question is, how would you look forward to? What would you look forward to in COP27? And during this year, what kind of efforts all countries will be engaged with?
Yeah, I'll just bring up my summary slide. I think COP26 was a great success. because it managed to get the decision on a topic where 2 COPs failed, which were the rules for international carbon markets. And I think these rules are very good. They are stringent and robust, so they can serve for many decades now, I would think. And that, of course, now means now one needs to fill them with life. So one needs to develop the methodologies for the Article 6.4. One needs to get the supervisory body up and running quickly. One needs to do the capacity building for developing countries to actually set up the institutions for the authorization of the international credits. And of course, what now needs to be done is to work with countries that have not updated their NDCs and that they increase their stringency. So, but overall, I totally disagree with the media who say it was a disappointment, it was a failure. It was not. It was probably the best COP we had after Paris. So, of course, Paris set the scene with the agreement, but there needed to be an implementation. And implementation was incomplete in Katowice in 2018, and now implementation is complete. So overall, I'm quite happy about the COP, and I hope that the international community will realize this quickly and work towards the full operationalization of, for example, the Article 6 mechanism. And with regard to what happens now for the COP27, well, Egypt is, of course, an interesting country because it's both African country but Arab country. So it's kind of bridge between 2 groups of countries that usually don't have so much in common. Arab countries are rich and fossil fuel exporters. African countries are poor. Okay, some of them are also fossil fuel exporters, but yeah, generally they are much more leaning towards a stringent policy and a lot of funding for adaptation. Whereas, of course, the Arab countries have so far not been willing to contribute to climate finance. But there was one very interesting movement that Qatar gave some money to the adaptation fund. Not much, but at least some. So it's a precedent. So the question is, can there be an initiative to provide some funding even within the Arab world? And then one could do a beautiful thing like matching of funding. So if the Arabs give $1, maybe the other industrialized countries give another dollar. So you can multiply the funding. Yeah, so I think there will be interesting possibilities to work with the Egyptians and also with regard to ocean issues. Now there will be the first ocean dialogue. And of course, Taiwan is a country that has intense interaction on ocean issues with small island states. So if, for example, Taiwanese participants in COP27 would focus on ocean issues, or maybe even some issues that could link Article 6 and oceans, like the so-called blue carbon, reforestation of mangroves, protection of mangrove seagrass, and so on. Also with advanced technologies for monitoring. I think this could be a topic where Taiwan could make a difference.
Great. Thank you for your response, and which is very optimistic to us. And probably I have a following question back to the issue about carbon credit. And since we heard of a lot of bad experiences here in Taiwan from companies, they say they are very eager to get some carbon credit from some agents in the international society, etc. And somehow some of them are not so, they are cheated indeed. Okay, so they purchase a lot of credits which is useless, or which is not in the market, the real market. And you also mentioned that a page for unified carbon pricing. Do you think those companies should wait for a while to until the carbon unified carbon pricing is in the market, and which will guarantee more reliable sources of carbon credits? Or
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. So of course, yeah, if companies just buy some credit on the voluntary market, they will run into trouble. And that's of course where my company Perspectives come in. We consult companies in their strategies, what types of credits they should buy. And my recommendation would be very clear. Of course, they should not buy the cheapest avoided deforestation credit from Papua New Guinea from a very weird company. That will lead to failure. But they should probably buy a credit, for example, coming from Nepal, which is giving corresponding adjustments, so full double bookkeeping. The first transactions of credits with Nepal by a German company that does offsetting of air traffic emissions. So that, of course, would be the high-end credit that will have the full value and will not be jeopardized. So if you think that there is an interest of various companies, I would be more than happy to offer them support for choosing the right type of credits.
That would be great. Thank you.
Hi, Josh. Thank you for your presentations. I have two questions. The first one is, if Taiwan's carbon fee is US $10 per ton, it will be much lower than EU's carbon price. It seems that there will be no advantage for Taiwan to fully respond to international CBAM. And also, it cannot be an effective economic incentive for companies to reduce emission. So if that's true, what's your suggestion to that?
The first thing I'll say to that is price is not always a good indicator of how well a scheme is likely to operate. The price doesn't always trigger innovation. And the important thing to think about here, it's not about where the current price is, it's about what the future price will be. And here the EU ETS is a good example. So not that long ago, even if we went back 3 or 4 years, the EU ETS carbon price was very, very low indeed, around 15 to 20 euros a tonne. We now have an EU ETS price of upwards of 60 euros a tonne. So price is not always a good indicator, or current price is not always a good indicator, but it's about future price and what that means for businesses. So here, and this relates to one of the recommendations in our report, is that there needs to be a clear commitment that the trajectory of the carbon price will rise, so that businesses have certainty to make investment decisions against. So yes, the starting price of $10 a tonne is relatively low, but price is not the only indicator. And just to reiterate, future price is far more important than current price.
My second question will be, Taiwan's economy is very dependent on foreign trade. So how should Taiwanese companies respond to current situations of carbon pricing schemes around the world? Please suggest to us. Thank you.
And the second question looks at how companies should respond. And the simple answer is that companies really don't need to do anything. It's up to them how they respond. It's not prescribed by the regulator. So it's a commercial decision how companies respond, and how they do is left to them. And this relates to the very first point I made around the flexibility associated with pricing, the economic efficiencies. It's because this flexibility is left to the firm rather than prescribed by the regulator. So they can choose whatever is the most efficient way, and that could be either paying the price, abating emissions, but it's up to them. But it goes back to the previous slide. Companies can respond by adapting, or innovating. And lastly, it's not just how companies should respond after the introduction of carbon price, but also policymakers. So to help companies innovate or adapt, policymakers can provide adequate compensation to businesses to mitigate the carbon risks of leakage. So, for example, under an emissions trading scheme, the government can allocate free emissions allowances to regulated entities, or firms' industry support is often also frequently implemented under an ETS around the world through other means such as recycling the revenue. In principle, an equivalent measure can also be done for carbon levies by offering free levy credits to businesses. So the companies can either adopt or innovate, they can either pay the price or not pay the price, that's a commercial decision, but there's flexibility associated with how you respond. And that means that carbon pricing compared to alternative policies such as regulations and subsidies means that there's overall lower costs, it's more economically efficient, but also important that the government helps companies respond as well.